Way, Laura.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm so excited to be here tonight, and I see many familiar faces in the crowd too, so that's great. So Carla, our wonderful communications specialist, is going to help run my slide deck. So, Carla, let's dive in, please. Next slide. Our agenda tonight. Well, the first thing I want to say is this slide deck and a recording of the presentation will be sent to everyone who registered for tonight's webinar. And so it usually takes our comms department about a week, but no worries, you will receive it. And our agenda tonight, we're going to do an overview of hyperscale data centers. What are they? Why are they being built? We're going to talk about federal and state level approaches. We're going to talk a lot about the impacts of hyperscale data centers. That's really something that every Wisconsinite needs to know about. We'll talk about local and state permitting processes, how these things actually get in the ground. I'm going to have very important call to action for you tonight. We'll spend a little bit of time on the unique role for faith communities, which will really resonate with Reverend Kelly's opening remarks. Then that will follow with question and answer period, and we will break out into small group discussions. So next slide, please. So what are hyperscale data centers? Data centers have been around for decades. They're not new. Often we think of them as server rooms, and they often might have a few hundred computers. They store, process, and manage data. So usually we're talking about maybe a couple hundred computers, like I said. What is so different about hyperscale data centers is the scale itself. They are absolutely massive. So the lowest parameters that I've seen to be called a hyperscale data center is 5,000 computers and 10,000 square feet. And many of these data centers are much longer. They consume as much energy as mid or large sized cities. They use huge amounts of water. We'll go into a lot of great detail about that later. And they occupy hundreds or even thousands of acres of land. So next slide. Why are they being built? It's because the rapid increase in things that I don't really understand that well, but things like cloud computing, cryptocurrency, and the big one is artificial intelligence, AI. And if you're like me, I've really started to hear a lot about this in the news over the past year or so. Big companies, Meta, Amazon, Google, Microsoft are building hyperscale data centers. They own and operate them. There are third-party developers that also will build them. They'll sell or lease space to businesses. There are roughly about 1,100 to 1,300 hyperscale data centers in the world, and the US has about half of them. In the US, there's nothing that says that they like have to register as hyperscale data centers, so the numbers are a little bit variable, but that's about the best estimates that I saw. Next slide deck. The federal level approach. The biggest thing to know about this is there isn't one. There's no singular data center specific regulatory scheme at the federal level. It's a real hodgepodge of actions, executive orders, oversight, and permitting requirements. The Biden administration actually did issue an executive order to lease federal land, to accelerate federal permitting, and to prioritize clean energy. It's really important to note that the Biden administration did want to prioritize clean energy when these things are being built. That's very different, as you might imagine, with the current administration. They have an AI action plan. They're trying to speed permitting, offer financial support, streamline, which really means reduce any sort of environmental review. And the current administration, their priority is not powering these things with clean energy whatsoever. Next slide, please. There are three different ways that states are approaching the data center boom. Some states are outright trying to block them. So we do have some states that are saying we don't want these things at all. Other states are trying to regulate them and put certain parameters or guardrails on them. One of those guardrails, an example, might be that they must be powered with renewable energy. Majority of states, I think about 38, including our own Wisconsin, are actually incentivizing them to come and build here. And they're doing that through tax breaks and subsidies. So in 2023, Wisconsin adopted a sales tax exemption, which allows hyperscale data center developers to pay no state sales tax. Politicians hail data centers as a source of growth and innovation. They ignore the long-term risks to our climate, our water, our health, and our energy bills. And when we give these large tax breaks to billion-dollar corporations, that revenue that we might have gotten is lost for other services. So the bottom line here is that profits are going to massive corporations and not to our communities. Next slide. So energy, this is absolutely a huge, huge impact. The fueling of them and the cooling of them require unprecedented amounts of energy. Two proposals, each with multiple data centers, requested 3.9 gigawatts of electric power combined. So according to Sierra Club, that's more energy than all households in Wisconsin currently use, and nearly 4 times the amount of energy used to power Orlando, Florida. So we're talking unprecedented amounts of energy, something like we've never seen before. Next slide, please. Impact climate. This is a big one. I think most of us know, most American study or surveys and studies show Americans recognize that climate change is happening. Certainly in Wisconsin, we already feel the impacts. Uh, Unfortunately, even though what we need in Wisconsin is a just transition to 100% renewable energy in order to mitigate the worst effects of the climate crisis, what we have is our utilities acting like this is a big payday. Let me explain that a little bit. Utilities are incentivized to build out coal and methane gas plants because when they do, they make a return on investment around 9.8 to 10% return on equity from the infrastructure that they build. So what's happening is We Energies is a great example. Last year, Microsoft came into Mount Pleasant and they are building, it's under construction, they are building a hyperscale data center. So We Energies said, hey, to power this hyperscale data center, we need to build out $3 billion worth of new methane gas infrastructure. That is absolutely what we should not be doing. That's going in the absolute wrong direction, despite historic and unprecedented public turnout. Before the Public Service Commission, in both written comments and public testimony, all three of the commissioners unanimously approved We Energy's proposal. They rubber stamped it. So now when we have something like that and we're looking at the data centers themselves, plus the utilities making paydays off of building out methane gas, also keeping coal plants online, and nuclear is another part. The nuclear has come back in the discussion. And so it's very concerning. In addition to the climate crisis, burning fossil fuels releases air and water pollution. It contributes to heart and lung diseases, asthma, cancers, and early deaths. So the climate impacts of both the data centers themselves and then how we're powering them are absolutely significant. Next slide. This is really important because those of us who are doing the least amount to contribute to these problems, like climate change or like hyperscale data centers being built, are targeted. They want to build in communities of color and low-income communities that they think are more vulnerable, that might put up less resistance. Historically, these areas are known as sacrifice zones, subject to environmental racism, and where we know that the industrial impact has already caused extreme degradation to the environment. Also, more than half of the mineral deposits that we need for the technology construction are on indigenous lands. And so they will have crucial resources depleted for the growth of AI. And we also know that our African American population, they're at higher risk for cancer and also their jobs will really be impacted. And I'm going to talk more about jobs a little bit later on. Next slide. Higher energy bills, this affects all of us. And one thing I'm going to say, I'm going to talk more about this, but the decisions that are being made, even if they're only like for We Energies, they're going to set precedent and they're going to affect every Wisconsinite. So, under the traditional utility model, cost for electricity is passed on to all customers. And tech companies say that they're going to foot the energy bill. They say they're going to pay their way, But really, promises can be broken, and without protections in place, we run the real risk of having higher energy bills. And ratepayers in other states have already seen this due to grid expansion needed to meet the needs of hyperscale data centers. And then a report by the Union of Concerned Scientists found that utilities in 7 states pass more than 4.3 billion in transmission connection costs to all ratepayers in 2024. The infrastructure that we need, again, it's not just building the data centers themselves, it's also, building what's going to run them, and then grid. We have to expand the grid as well. So uh, Milwaukee has one of the highest energy burdens in the country. So the thought rural Wisconsin also struggles with energy burden, meaning people are having to choose whether they pay for their energy bills or whether they put food on table or whether they buy medicines. So higher energy bills is again going in the exact wrong direction. Next slide. Jobs. I mentioned this before. This is a big one. So politicians, the reason why the states are encouraging hyperscale data centers to come in is because, it's innovation, it's progress, it's good for the local economy, and it's going to create jobs. So studies consistently show building the hyperscale data centers can be done. I mean, that creates jobs, and then you can do it with skilled union construction workers. So often you'll find that the unions are in favor of hyperscale data centers, and they're in favor of like methane gas infrastructure and things like that because it provides jobs. The problem is that hyperscale data centers provide very few good paying, permanent local jobs once construction is completed. And one example in Illinois, there's one hyperscale data center. The company received over $38 million in tax breaks, but it only created 20 permanent jobs. Next slide. And we can't forget the impact on our health. And I purposely have a slide of a child here. We know that children, they have smaller lungs, they're outside more. If adults are vulnerable, children are more so, and that's factually documented. So scientists have estimated that increased emissions from data centers have already cost our public health system 5.4 billion in pollution-driven asthma, cancer, and other illnesses. And here's how it happens. Directly, hyperscale data centers run on large diesel generators for backup. So these generators are not operating all the time, but they do run for maintenance, and they do run during brownouts or blackouts. And diesel pollution increases the risk of cancer in human beings. Indirectly, it goes back to what I was just talking about. The Wisconsin utilities are using this as a payday to build out more methane gas and to keep coal online and even exploring nuclear. So we already know that burning fossil fuels, it's bad for our people, it's bad for our planet, and it's bad for our pocketbooks. Next slide. I just wanted to mention this noise pollution. So they're noisy. On average, they're well over 80 decibels. Around 70 decibels is a safe level. So we have had seen results if we look at studies of neighboring communities that are feeling disturbed. They have sleep disturbances, headaches, anxiety, as well as increased risk of heart disease. And truthfully, we'll talk a little bit more about where the data centers, hyperscale data centers, are coming into Wisconsin. I don't know of one single community right now that has their arms open and are welcoming this type of development. Next slide. Water is the other really significant one. So most data centers use inefficient open loop water cooling systems. The problem with this is about 80% of the water evaporates. And then you see here a single large-scale data center can use an average of 5 million gallons of water per day. That's about the equivalent of 16,000, well, close to 17,000 households. There's another alternative. It's a closed loop system and it does recycle the water so it can be used multiple times. The only problem with that is it requires vast amounts of energy and requires vast amounts of water. So an analysis by our friends at Clean Wisconsin found that if the Vantage Data Center, which is currently being constructed in Port Washington, was powered with non-renewable energy sources, its off-site water use would be at least 54 million gallons of water per day. So again, Energy, water, it's staggering and unprecedented amounts, things that I don't really think we've seen before by like single users. So next slide. I want to talk about this because we're in Wisconsin. I don't know about you, but I love the Great Lakes. They're close to my heart and they're really, really important. They hold 20% of the Earth's fresh water. We need to protect them. We know the Great Lakes are already under threat with climate change. And so a nonprofit called the Alliance for the Great Lakes did a study and found that hyperscale data centers may withdraw as much as 150 billion gallons of water nationally from the Great Lakes over the next 5 years. And that's equivalent to water consumed by 4.6 million households. The report found that the Great Lakes, they're unprepared for this kind of growing demand with the expansion of hyperscale data centers. And like I said, they're already fragile and hurting because of climate change. So again, it's very concerning and seems like we're going in the wrong direction. Next slide. Higher water bills. So sometimes data centers can negotiate discounted rates. When that happens, everyday customers end up covering the difference. And even when they pay standard rates, because they are using so much water, it strains local infrastructure, and utilities have to invest in upgrades, and those costs fall on you and me. They're passed on to all ratepayers. So next slide. Land is the other thing. So I said these are absolutely massive, massive industrial complexes almost, and they're buying out family farms. They're plowing over our soil, dumping concrete, and making complexes that span hundreds to thousands of acres. And this disrupts our local ecosystems that are already fragile and stressed by climate change. Next slide. I just wanted to have this is sort of like a headline. It's based on a new report from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and it says powering data centers with clean energy could avoid trillions in climate and health costs and protect Midwest families from data center driven energy bill spikes. So the one takeaway from this is that if these things are coming, hyperscale data centers, if they are coming, then they must be powered by renewable energy. Next slide, please. How do these things get in the ground? This is really important to know. So I said there was no framework federally. There's also no real framework locally. It's a mix of laws and regulations that existed before this boom. Local planning tools that you might heard of are comprehensive plans like your planning committee or your planning commission. These are usually updated about every 10 years. Um, Obviously, most of our municipalities have zoning codes, but the one thing to know is that none of these plans or zoning codes were designed with hyperscale data centers in mind. And so now communities are really having to grapple with where they want the data centers and if they're going to allow them. And I'll talk about how specific communities are responding. Next slide, please. Just really quickly before we go local again, the state. So hyperscale data centers do require construction approval. And again, this is going to be at the local level with local zoning, building permits, and state tax incentive approvals. It's very important to know the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, they don't have to approve the construction of hyperscale data center buildings, but they have to approve the plans that utilities make. So when I told you We Energies was going to build 3 billion of methane gas to power, they said, to power Microsoft's data center. Well, it's the Wisconsin Public Service Commission that has to approve it. So they are a very important player in this whole scenario. I'm going to just say quickly, air and wetland permits from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources come into play. And I'm not going to go into this in detail, but we do have a law, it's Wisconsin Environmental Policy Act that requires environmental impact statements. Next slide. There has been a frightening lack of transparency. So, what's been happening is the tech companies and developers have been coming into Wisconsin communities. We know at least four: Beaver Dam, Menominee, Kenosha, and Janesville, and they are signing non-disclosure agreements. So, the municipality officials cannot talk about what's happening. And then these things are well underway, and then residents find out that they're coming to their community. And researchers in Virginia did find at least 80% of local governments that approved or were considering data center projects had signed non-disclosure agreements with companies involved. Next slide. Okay, so this is where we come into Wisconsin. So we have about 40 data centers right now. Most are tiny. There are 6 hyperscale data centers coming into the state right now. 3 are under construction: Mount Pleasant, Beaver Dam, and Port Washington. I will tell you, Beaver Dam and Port Washington have on the ground activists that have been trying to fight these things. In Port Washington, they're trying to recall the mayor. 3 are being proposed in Janesville. So they're being proposed. They aren't yet in construction in Janesville, Kenosha, and Menominee. Janesville and Kenosha have active groups actively fighting it. And then the data center proposed in Menominee last year is on pause. So that city did pass an ordinance that creates a new zoning definition and provides more guardrails. So now the developer is called Balloonist. They will have to reapply and start the entire application over and have the land rezoned as a data center industrial district. And we do know that they are planning to reapply. I will say 3 communities have successfully blocked data centers from coming in, and it was due to community opposition, and that's Caledonia, Greenleaf, and DeForest. Next slide. I can't emphasize this enough. Every one of us has to start paying attention to what's happening at the local level, what's happening in our communities and at our county. So cities and counties post hearing notices on their websites, and you can look for meeting agendas or public hearing announcements. One takeaway from this should be we all need to pay attention to what's happening in our own backyards. Next slide. Now, this is really important. So this is what I can say. So if you want to do something, so state level, here it is. So right now, before the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, we're going to call it a case. And it's being brought by Wisconsin Electric Power Company. That's a subsidiary of We Energies. It's called a very large customer tariff docket, but you don't need to know that, and I would just plan on forgetting it. The language is purposefully confusing. Here's the thing. We Energies, their subsidiary, has a proposal for hyperscale data centers. Basically, who's going to pay for it in front of the Wisconsin Public Service Commission. It is a terrible proposal. The Public Service Commission is having 2 public hearings. They're both virtual. One's on February 10th at 1 p.m. The other is February 10th at 6 p.m. And everything you see here, we're going to drop a link in the chat. And that link in the chat will take you to a blog post from Faith and Place, and it will have all this information with all this links. So I encourage you, please sign up to testify. It is as simple as saying to tell the commissioners, we want this utility proposal rejected, and Wisconsin needs to slow down and develop a comprehensive state plan to deal with these things. You can also submit a written comment. You can write a letter to the editor. You can host a postcard party, and you can sign up for a Faith and Place Action Fund. That's our C4 fund, and Faith and Place, we're a member of the Clean Economy Coalition. We actively track what's happening at the state and federal levels, so you don't have to. And we send out action alerts to mobilize our members and make it as easy as possible for you to engage in the process. So there's a link in the chat. So if you click on it, it will have all this information. All the links are there. It will have a guide on how to write a letter to the editor. You can download postcards. So all the information is there. And like I said, maybe if you take away one thing, it's to please tell the Wisconsin Public Service Commission to reject WEPCO's proposal. Go back to the drawing board. We need to slow down, and we need to think about how it's best for our state and Wisconsinites to be handling this issue. Next slide. I just want to say there's a very unique role for faith communities to play. Most of the public discussion that you hear about this is always about jobs, tax base, growth, competition with other states. But faith communities can really broaden this discussion and ask ethical questions. Who bears the environmental and energy costs? Who benefits and who doesn't? And what obligations do powerful corporations who rake in billions of dollars have to local communities? And also, how should we weigh present gains with long-term stewardship? Next slide. Also, faith institutions can convene people for difficult community conversation. They often have higher trust than developers, utilities, or government agencies, especially in rural or small town settings. Faith communities can host listening sessions or community forums. You can invite the utilities, the developers and regulators and residents into the same room. And you can create a space for respectful dialogue, especially where disagreement is expected. It feels like civil discourse is something that we're losing in the United States, or maybe it's already gone. And faith communities have a key role to play in bringing it back. Next slide. Faith communities can also advocate for transparency and accountability. Wisconsinites need to know what's going on. We don't want big tech sneaking in under the cloak of darkness, putting things in our ground and then having us find out about it. And it's especially important because the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, it is purposefully difficult. It's technical. It's hard to follow. And so it makes regular people not able to really engage. Local residents, if you find out this is coming into your community, you can feel overwhelmed. Decisions are being made on accelerated timelines. So really, where clergy and faith leaders and faith communities can come in, we can take the complex issues and just translate them into value-based language that is accessible to people. Next slide. And also, well, I don't know about you, but I haven't shared a ton of good news tonight. And I mean, this can make us feel anxious and fearful. We already are under siege with a lot of different areas in life. So, faith communities, they already do and they can provide pastoral care, counseling, and just practical assistance. I think that one of the biggest things that we need to, the fear and the isolation can be overwhelming. So, when we come together in community and we're with like-minded people, it can be incredibly powerful. Next slide. And then just the other thing is that this is moving lightning fast. So the tech companies are saying we must move, we must move. And faith communities are one of the few institutions that, they've been around for a really, really long time. And we need the long view with this, not the short view. And next slide. So Harvard, I don't know if you know this, but Harvard has a human flourishing program. And so when they talk about AI, they talk about six different dimensions: planetary well-being, physical and mental well-being, financial and material well-being, relational well-being, community well-being, and spiritual well-being. And we need to take into account all six of these dimensions when we're having conversations in Wisconsin about hyperscale data centers. And then next slide. I'm going to wrap it up here. I feel like I've been talking quite a lot, but here is a quote. I love this quote, and I just wanted to leave it with you tonight. So, by situating AI within this broader framework, we reject AI determinism, the notion that artificial intelligence is an inevitable, independent force shaping our social and economic future. Instead, we affirm that AI remains a human-directed tool that must be intentionally oriented toward human flourishing and the common good. So that's what I have. Thank you all for having me, and I think we'll turn it over to Linda now.
Yes. Thanks, Laura. We all know more about hyperscale data centers than we did a half an hour ago.